Hello, class. It's nice to see you all. Today we're going to be reviewing animals and their climates. This is something we've been talking about in our class. But first, before we get into the lesson, I wanted to talk to you all. I wanted to share with you that I'm going on a trip next summer. I'm going to be going to Egypt. Now, you guys know where Egypt is, right? On the map? Yeah,
No.
you don't? Well, Egypt is in the top of Africa, and it's in a pretty desert, sandy place. It's pretty hot there. So, if I'm going to go to Egypt, I'm going to need to pack up my suitcase and take my camera, of course. But what are some clothes that I would need to pack if I'm going to spend a week in Egypt? Can someone tell me?
Sandals.
Sandals. Okay, could someone give me another example? Don't be shy. What's something you'd want to wear in the desert?
A t-shirt.
A t-shirt. Thank you, Jane. Okay, so that's a good list. I'll need to add that to my packing list. But this winter, I'm going to go live and I'm not going to go live. I'm going to go on vacation to Antarctica. And I'm going to see some penguins and be at the science station in Antarctica. So, what are some clothes I would need to pack to go to Antarctica? Could someone give me an
A
example?
jacket.
A jacket. Okay, what's something else?
Boots.
Boots. Thank you. So, a jacket and boots for Antarctica. But you guys have never been to Egypt or Antarctica. So, how did you know what kind of clothes to pack?
I looked at the weather.
You looked at the weather. That's a good point. So, we can uh, determine what the weather is going to be, not only using um, like all of the meteorology technology and all of that, but we can figure out that certain places have weather patterns that repeat over and over again. Like every summer, we know in Kentucky it's going to be really hot. And then around January and February, it's going to be really cold. That's our climate. So, as humans, we've made clothes and we've built houses and done all this stuff, but animals haven't done that. They don't have like houses with insulation or blankets or jackets to keep them warm. They just have to depend on their characteristics. And like we talked about in the past, characteristics are a part of an animal. So today we're going to be combining those two ideas. So if we take a look at our lesson objectives, we're going to talk about the different climates of the world. You're going to be able to predict where animals may live based on their characteristics and use your brains and your reasoning to figure out where they go as a class. So let's talk about the 7 major climates that we have been discussing. So, can someone give me um, some characteristics of the desert? What would you find in the desert?
Sand.
Sand. What's the weather like there? What's the temperature?
Hot.
Hot. And then I would say it's also dry. Okay, what about the mountains? What are the mountain regions like?
Rocky.
Rocky.
Sometimes snow, like on the tops.
Sometimes snow. Thank you, Katie. And then I will say, I think that's pretty good for rock mountains because we talked about how mountains can be a little different depending on where you go. And then in the rainforest, of course, there is a lot of rain and it's wet. And we have a lot of plants. What about the wetlands? What's in the wetlands?
Water.
Water and wet. Yeah. So they have a lot of rain too. And then We have the temperate forest, which is where we live. What's the weather like in the temperate forest?
Seasonal and
Yeah.
mild.
Seasonal and it's mild. That was a good vocabulary word, seasonal. And then we have some rain, but it's not a defining feature of the climate. And then grasslands, of course, they have a lot of grass and it's generally dry. And what's something else?
They have certain animals that are equipped to the area, like prairie dogs.
Yeah, that's a good idea, Katie. They have a lot of animals that are meant for that area. So that's all we'll put for grasslands. And then we have the polar region, which is obviously very cold and it's very and sorry, I lost my place, guys. It's very cold and it has a lot of ice. We'll put ice. So here are the very basic ideas. We took notes and we did worksheets about all of these the past few days for science. So I bet you guys know your climates very well at this point. So now we are going to do like a little bit of a game. If you guys will all go to your Google Slides that is on your like I shared the link with you. I don't know, Jane, did you get that?
Got it.
Okay. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're going to, we have all of these pictures. As you can see, I'm dragging this one around and we're gonna move the animals to where they think they live. So everyone go to slide 4 and you can ask questions about it if you don't know, but go ahead and select one animal and move it over to the area. And then we'll talk about the answers that you guys get. So you can go ahead and do that. And then we will see. All right, so it looks like we got most of them. I'll go ahead and do this last one. So over here we have the mountains. So we have an eagle, then we have a parrot, then we have a goat, I guess an ibex kind of figure, and then we have another horned animal. So let's just take a couple of these and look at them. Why do we know that this one right here, I'm going to make it bigger so we can all see. How do we know that this one lives in the mountains? What are some characteristics that let us know that it would live in the mountains?
It has fur.
It has fur. So as we talked about, mountains can get pretty cold because they're up so high. So they need to have a lot of thick fur to keep them warm. So based off of our 3 different climates here, we can make a pretty good guess that they would go in the mountains. But I wanted to look at this one right here. We have what is called an African gray parrot. And if we had more time, we would go into all of these, but I really wanted to focus on this one. So someone put this in the mountains, and that is a good guess because birds are able to live in the mountains. But when we look at some of its characteristics, like its beak, for example, its beak is large and it's meant for like cracking open nuts or looking for bugs. So that's not really something we would see in the mountains. That would be something, where do you think this one could go instead? If it's not the mountains and it's instead looking for nuts and bugs and something for its large beak to break into, where would that go? Can anyone give an answer? The rainforest? Yes, I agree. I think this one would go into the rainforest. but all of the others seem to look correct. This one, we don't know much about it just based off the picture, but we could guess that it could go into the mountains or the grasslands because it's just a horned mammal. We're not really sure what it is. So if you guys will go to page 5, I think I'm almost out of time, but we'll just be really quick. Let's do, you guys can go ahead and move these around on page 5, if you don't mind. And then we'll just make sure all of those are correct. And be thinking about it, what kind of feet it has, how it would get its food, and how it could survive either the really hot or the really cold. Okay, it looks like you guys got most of them. So let's talk about a couple. We'll just pick some at random, like this great blue heron here. I'm sure you guys have seen these. They're in Kentucky. It has, it was put into the wetlands by someone. Could someone tell me why it was a part of the wetlands climate and habitat?
It has long legs to stand in water.
That is a very good point. So it has these long, skinny legs that we can see here, and that helps it stand in the water. If it were in the polar region, its legs would get really cold, and it probably couldn't live there. What about this salamander? How do we know that the salamander doesn't live in, say, the polar region? What's
It doesn't have fur.
It doesn't have fur. So like we talked about, a salamander is an amphibian, and amphibians can't live in the polar region. They need somewhere warm, like the wetlands. So if we look at the rest of these, you guys seem to get them all right. We have a snowy owl, of course, in the snow, the squirrel in the forest, a coyote could be in the forest. We'll go with that. A cardinal in the forest. And then we have a camel, which I'm sure you guys have heard has a lot of water in that hump. So that way it can survive in the desert, which doesn't have a lot of water. And then we have this last one. Could anyone tell me whether they agree or disagree with a seal being in the desert? Whoops, sorry. My phone's going off. Okay. Could someone answer that for me?
I agree with the seal being in the desert because it has no fur, so it wouldn't get hot.
That's a really good point. So seals don't have fur. As we can see in the picture, they kind of have some whiskers, but they don't have fur. But what we need to remember is that a seal is still a mammal because it has live babies, it doesn't lay eggs, it has warm blood. So a seal is not a fish or any of that other stuff. It's a mammal. And when mammals are in the cold area, what do they use instead of fur? What's something a marine animal could use instead of fur? Does anyone know?
Blubber.
Blubber. That's another good vocab word to use. Good job, Jane. So blubber, he looks really fat, doesn't he? That's called blubber, and that help keeps you nice and warm. So that way you're not directly with the really cold water and the really cold air. That's help keeps you warm. Although when you're just looking at the picture, I can see where you think it's a desert animal because it doesn't have any fur at all. It looks like the skin that we have, but it's actually blubber as well. But you guys did a really good job sorting out all these animals. I'm very impressed. I'm glad you all have been working on all of your worksheets and doing your homework and reviewing. So let's just go over this one more time, and we will list one thing that an animal has in this climate. So I'll do one for you. Like Jane said, in the polar region, an animal would have blubber to keep them warm. So what is something an animal in the desert might have? Anyone can answer.
A hump. To store
Hump.
water.
Okay, so a way to store water, like a hump. So we'll put hump up there just because we think of camels when we think of the desert. What about the mountains?
Fur to keep them warm.
Okay, so thick fur, like that goat we had. And then what about the rainforest?
A hard beak.
A hard beak, especially for those crazy birds that we see in like rainforest books or on TV. They always have these big beaks like a toucan, and that helps them eat their food in the rainforest. What about the wetlands?
Long legs for birds to stand in water.
Good. Long legs to help with water. It would help with hunting. Let's say that because they're in the water to hunt. And then the temperate forest, we didn't really get to talk about that much today. So I will say in the temperate forest, they have arms and legs to climb. Like they might have special paws or special legs like a squirrel that helps them crawl up trees and live in the trees. And then what's something a lot of animals have in the grasslands? Well, let's think about it for a moment. Grasslands, as we said, were in Africa. What's an animal that you think of when you think of like that wide open Lion King savanna? What's an animal
Prairie
that would live?
dog.
A what?
A prairie dog.
A prairie dog. So they have to burrow away in the ground. So they may have,
Claws.
yeah, they'll have claws to live underground. Another thing that the grasslands might have are hooves because they're able to run quickly in the wide open area. So I'll put that as well. Okay, so we went over animals and their climates and how they're able to live in their climates. So I want to thank you all for being good listeners and helping me figure out where the animals go. And I really appreciate you being patient and getting on the Zoom in a timely manner. Thank you very much.